Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have a book review of the book The Magic of Recluce, the first book in the saga of Recluce by L E Modesitt Jr. I think I'm pronouncing that last name right. This is the first book in a multi-book spanning series. I think it's something like 22 books. And apparently the book series is all over the place in a timeline. This is actually one of the last books in the series in the timeline, but it was written first. And it kind of reminds me of how Shannara is all over the place, but it still has some books are connected. But apparently this one's, it's less, there's fewer trilogies or duologies in this series, and it's more standalone books that just take place in different parts in the universe, and you're just supposed to follow them and just have fun with each book as its own kind of standalone book in a universe. Which I like the concept of it, I'm just not sure how easy it is to market that, but apparently this did well because this entire series out of 22 books, it sold 3 million copies, which is an average of about 150,000 copies a book, which is not too bad. So I picked this book up because of the cover art, because it has cover art by my favorite cover artist, Daryl K. Sweet, and because my local bookstore, I went 3 different times and I was able to find them. I had this book, and then I was able to find book 2, The Towers of Sunset, book 3, The Magic Engineer, and book 4, The Order War. I love all of these cover arts. I love all of the way that they're designed, and since this was the first 4 books, I was like, you know what, I think I'll get them. And so this is a time where judging a book by its cover helped, because I picked this series up because of its cover art, not because of its reviews necessarily, or because of its prestige or anything, because it really doesn't have that. And this is not a book series talked about on BookTube for some reason, and I think it's a shame because I love this era, this 90s era of classic fantasy. That's my favorite genre and era of fantasy. So I read this book and I have many, many thoughts. So why don't I get into those thoughts? So the first thing I'll have to say about this book is it is more of a character journey than it is a action-adventure book. It has a lot of tropes that fantasy books have, but the way it executes those tropes is very unique. For instance, you have young men who have to go on this journey, and some young women as well, who go on this journey about finding themselves as adults. And it involves them going to a faraway land and having to do some things. So there's an element of that kind of YA sense of your main protagonist. Then there's also some themes about good versus evil. It's order versus chaos type thing happening in this magic system. And so the magic system is very 90s in the way that it kind of has that dichotomy there. And also the feel of the book. It very much feels medieval fantasy. That's just what it feels like, so it works well. However, what I think that this book lacks is that the first half of the book seems aimless, while as the second half of the book seems purposeful, and I think that if he had added more of the plot into the first half and added clues as to where we were going, that it would have propelled the reader more. The first half of the book really does feel like a character journey of our main character, Laris, trying to find himself in the world, find his purpose, find his value, find what he's going to do. The second half is, he's found it, here's where he's going. And it works as the novel that Modesitt Jr. wanted to write. But I think that if you wanted to make it more engaging and you wanted to make it more fast-paced, that I would have included some more of it in the earlier parts. And he has hints in the early parts of where he's going, but you really don't know until, it's a 500-page mass market book, you really don't know where it's going until about page 300, maybe 350. The last portion of the book really picks up. Lots of action, lots of purpose, lots of things going on. And I think one of the reasons I think this book isn't as strong as it could have been is also because it's first person, with the exception of a few chapters that go to third person for some other characters. And first person can work, but when it's a long fantasy, this constitutes in my book a tome because it's over 500 pages. It is 501 pages, but tomes are over 500 pages. And when you have a tome that is first person, it is really difficult to stick with that main character. We're sticking in Lord of the Rings. We stick with Frodo for most of the time, yet because it's not first person, because it's third person, it's easier to handle. The Harry Potter books are shorter, and also I feel like they're balanced more with their plots, and so you're able to have first person better there. But this book, it just felt like it was wrong to do it in first person. But that being said, I absolutely love the character of Laris. He goes on a big journey from the beginning of the book. This young teenage angsty doesn't know where he wants to go in life, and by the end, he's a master woodcarver, or at least he won't admit it, but he's a master woodcarver. He is a order master, and he has found his purpose as a wizard, and he is going about doing the things he needs to do in the end of the book, which I won't spoil. And also, he has this incredibly dynamic, engaging aspect to his character, which is that he is tempted throughout the book. There is a lot of times where he is put into a situation where he could do something dishonorable, and it usually has to do with his has to do with his honor towards a girl, if that's the most diplomatic way of putting it. And I like the way that L E Modesitt Jr. writes this, because he has these feelings, these desires, and he recognizes the temptations, but he doesn't act on them, and he realizes that acting on them is wrong. And whenever he gets really close to doing something that would be dishonorable, he pulls back and says, no, the honorable thing is for me to leave you and not to engage in this activity. And it's really refreshing, because that type of a thing isn't really celebrated. And it's not just celebrated with him as a character that you cheer for, but the other characters are shocked by this. They're shocked by how honorable he is, and they're actually impressed that he would do this. They are impressed that he would have this kind of this maturity, this moral compass that he would have that was so strong. And so it's very refreshing to read that type of a thing in a book. And some characters actually change their opinions of him because of that. They view him in a higher regard, which is just refreshing that a book would treat him like that. And there's other points where he could have settled for something. He could have settled for a simpler life, but he realizes there is more at stake. There is something valuable to becoming an order master. And instead of settling, he gives up that life to someone else so that he can live the harder life of being an order master. It's just wonderful, all that stuff. We also have an interesting dichotomy of, traditionally in literature, the color of white is associated with good guys, and the color of black is associated with bad guys. It's very, very common in all of literature. It's completely flipped here, and white is the color of bad guys, and black is the color of good guys, because white is an amalgam of all the colors together, and therefore represents the chaos, whereas black is a pure color and is a representation of order. And I thought that was very interesting, and it made for visual, because the characters, it's kind of cheesy if this was real life, but in a fantasy series it works, that the bad guys wear all white, and the good guys wear all black, and they're referred to as the black wizards and the white wizards, and it actually makes it really compelling, and it makes it very visual and very vivid. It makes the villains more vivid than they would be if they were just wearing black cloaks. Instead, they're wearing white cloaks. Kind of like what Robert Jordan did, making the white cloaks literal white cloaks. Anyway, so that dichotomy was really interesting. I also kind of like where the book ended up, and you could see that he laid a lot of the groundwork for the end of the book in the middle part, but he could have done it better, I think. I did really like when our main character was with the character of Justin, who's kind of like the older, wiser gray wizard. I really liked the way that the two of them had a dynamic together, and I really liked the way that Justin serves the purpose of the old wise character who is imparting knowledge of the history of the world, of the magic system, and also of just morals to the main character. And that type of thing was really, I think the author handled it really well. When Justin was not present, it was harder to get into the book until our main character Laris meets the woodcarving family and decides to pour into his book. That is really when, the moment that he joins that family is when the book took off for me and really got interesting. So overall, I think that this is a solid book. I don't think it is amazing. It is not in the upper echelons of fantasy novels for me, but it's certainly not a low novel by any means. It's just a solid, I would give it a 7 out of 10. I intend to read more in the series since I have books 2 through 4 already, and I know book 5 follows these characters again, yippee. But I'm interested in reading more of this series, and since they are essentially standalones generally, except I know there are trilogies and duologies in here, but since it's generally standalones, I don't feel this compelling need to keep going. I might just, whenever I just need a classic fantasy and I know this is going to be a solid classic fantasy, I'll just pick one of these up and read it. And they're not terribly long, but they are tomes, but they're not terribly long tomes like the Stormlight Archive or the Wheel of Time. So those are my thoughts on the Magic of Recluce, which I kept spelling wrong the whole time. But it was a really engaging book, but the first half needed a little bit of work. So those are my thoughts. If you've read this book, what were your thoughts? Have you read the rest of the series? Are there other books in the series that you would consider standouts? And why is this book not talked about on BookTube? Answer all that question and more in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.